Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the 18th edition of the FreeFuse sessions. I am your host, one of the co-founders and CEO of FreeFuse, Mike. I am here today with Wendy Harper Lanabaugh, and she is one of the she is the co-owner and director of aesthetic training at Skinovation Advanced Aesthetics, the premier med spa practice in Asheville, North Carolina. She and her partner, Tina Franklin, RN, provide personalized treatments and provide coaching on how to maintain and maximize health and beauty at any age. Wendy is an advanced practice registered nurse, a certified family nurse practitioner, and a doctor of nursing practice. She is a highly skilled cosmetic injector and physician trainer. She specializes in anti-aging, regenerative, and aesthetic medicine for adult patients. So without further ado, Wendy, if you want to go ahead and give a few more, details about yourself and, other points to that introduction, please go ahead and feel free.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I am actually using the FreeFuse platform to launch a nursing education aesthetic injector program. And I'm really excited about it because I've been a trainer for 11 years now, and, I'm an injector myself. But I really, after getting my doctorate, I made my main focus aesthetic medicine, non-invasive aesthetic medicine, specifically how it relates to patient education. And one of the things that was blaringly obvious as I was doing my research was just how hard it is for nurses to get into this field. I get asked all the time, how do I become a cosmetic injector? And how do I become a trainer? And I started thinking about it, and I really wanted to create a platform where nurses could go specifically and get trained, pay money, get trained, get the credentials that they want to get, and then go out into the world and get hired, as opposed to having to sign. It's so hard to get somebody to give you an opportunity, and a lot of clinics will try to require their injectors to sign these really restrictive non-compete documents that just make it incredibly hard, because you really can't leave. And if you do leave, it makes it so you almost can't work. And I just feel like there should be more freedom in this industry for registered nurses, because it is within our skill set to inject. And I think that the general public doesn't understand the credentials required to do this. And I just wanted to create a pathway so nurses could decide for themselves, yes, I want to do this, get the education that they need, and then go for it.
Yeah, and that's so interesting too, because you have a perspective that I think is really interesting, and a lot of people probably don't really know about those things like the non-competes and what some of the challenges that some of these nurses have to deal with. I think you mentioned a little while back that there's quite a bit of pay gap for folks who just come right out of school, and the amount of upskilling that they can do to earn a nice, comfortable living. I know that you're developing programs around addressing that. How do you feel like some of these nurse practitioners or folks who maybe are looking to start a career in that realm, how do you think that they could best sort of apply their trade and figure out ways to upskill so that they can actually have the most opportunities for themselves?
Well, I think especially when you're talking about an advanced practice nurse, like a nurse practitioner, who, by the way, also many of them have independent practice in many states across the United States, they are already coming to the table with mad skills. I mean, just great. A lot of them are doing just high functioning, complicated skills. They're in the operating room, they're in the ER, they're in every specialty. And so they already have skills for procedures, suturing, things that you do in the clinical area. And these support what you do in aesthetics. But I came to aesthetics as a nurse practitioner, and compared to what I had been doing clinically before, this really just wasn't that hard. And so you already have a lot of the skills. If you're an advanced practice nurse, of course, you already have a lot of the skills that you need. If you're a new nurse, I would encourage any new nurse to at least work one year in the hospital, because I think it gives you a great clinical foundation, and then to go to aesthetics because you'll be a better injector for it. But, you know, if you're talking, it's kind of apples and oranges. If you're talking about somebody that's already a nurse practitioner, you know, they prescribe, they do a lot of higher level things. So when they come in, it really is just, they're starting at a different start point than somebody that's a novice. Does that make
Right.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I think that, you know, there's probably, you know, probably for laymen or, you know, folks who might not understand that field, they probably don't understand the difference maybe between what is sort of like, you know, where folks are at, you know, a nurse practitioner level and maybe just kind of like someone sort of coming out of school, right? Because they might think that there's actually a lot of similarities there. So, you know, what have you seen as been kind of like the commonalities of some of these folks who are looking to maybe sort of build on their career and think through how they might want to improve their skill set to build themselves up, and how you're maybe addressing that with some of your programs?
Well, I think the main thing is you're switching your specialty to aesthetics. So the first thing you've got to figure out is how are you going to get trained? And so there's a lot of programs out there. And it's interesting because this field is largely unregulated, and it's better than it used to be. But again, the general public has no idea. When I started in 2012, I was blown away by the lack of regulatory control. And, you know, and it's really, when you think about it, it's a specialty that really insurance isn't going to pay for it. Government programs aren't going to pay for it. So it's just really a cash business. People are paying for it. And it sort of becomes a little bit difficult because people are paying for it. So they're demanding treatments that may or may not be appropriate for them. And that's, you know, that's a different problem. But as far as individuals who are licensed and want to get into the field, the most important thing that you can do is get a reputable training experience and then get hands-on training as well. I don't think I've ever trained a nurse coming into this industry that didn't come in knowing the anatomy. Like, and maybe I've just been with great people, I don't know, but it seems like nurses are so eager to learn that they come to the table already knowing the facial anatomy, like they do their homework. And I think that just making sure that you're with a good training entity is really important. And like I said, there's so many out there. Anybody can call themselves a training facility. You know, and I would encourage people to ask whatever facility they're going to go with, ask them, how long have you been training? How many physicians or nurses or providers have you trained? Do you offer any support after the training? These are all important questions. I get asked a lot about certification. And right now for nurses and injectors, the only certification that you can get is the CAN certification, which is it's a certified aesthetic nurse injector certification, except you can only get it if you're working in the specialty of plastics or dermatology. And so that makes it hard for all the nurses working within med spas because they can't sit for that exam. 30% of the medical spas in America are core physician, which is going to be your plastic or your dermatology owned, but 70% of medical spas in America are owned by non-core, what we call non-core providers, meaning they're not in those specialties, they're in other specialties. So we need to create some kind of certification for this 70% of people working that aren't core specialists. So as far as that goes, and I think that's surprising, and it's surprising to patients that there isn't more regulation around this. So a lot of it is self-regulation. And, you know, as a nurse, I'm required to do that with my state board anyway. There's a certain number of CMEs that I need to get every year as an RN and as an NP. So we have that, but just specific to aesthetics, I want to be a part of creating more, because a lot of the content out there is also provided by the pharmaceutical companies, which is great. However, you always just have to remember that they have an end game in mind too, and that's selling product. So of course they want the consumers to want their products. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that's capitalism in America. But when you have the pharmaceutical companies, it's just like all other drugs, directly marketing to the consumers, and they're the ones providing all the education. You just don't have an unbiased situation.
Right, right. And I mean, it's kind of, in a sense, it's kind of like it's not really like a conflict of interest, like, like that, but it does lend itself to saying, like, of course they're going to say nicer things about the particular product. And I mean, it is a good way for them to get folks on board. And it's why I actually appreciate your approach, that you're, as as a practice, and as a clinicians yourselves, basically, like, you are folks who are actually trying to put out the information that can help people from that perspective, right? And I think that the other thing that I find really interesting about the programs that you're building is that you're actually building out programs around whether you should diagnose people, right? Or whether you should, work around some of the things that they're having challenges with, and whether those are how someone should intake somebody and really explore some of the options, right? And that's really, of course, kind of use agnostic, right? So, like, not actually using a particular product. And you've used, as you mentioned, on brand and off brand stuff as well. And so that's why I've always appreciated kind of like what you're trying to do, because it's from somebody who's actually built things up. And so, you're not really getting this perspective of, oh, there is that end game, but you're actually from this perspective of, hey, if you want to follow this path, whether you want to open your own place or whether you want to, just build up your skills, I'm more likely to be somebody who can give you completely kind of unbiased information than really anybody else.
Yeah, and listen, I have worked for big pharma in this industry. I speak for them, and I think they have amazing educational materials. Like, every injector should, participate in their talks. They do a great job. But in terms of getting a foundation so that you know everything, or as much as you can consume, because it's not just about this product or that product, it's understanding everything that's available on the US market, and then being able to pick the right product for the right patient. And it's really hard, because in this field, because patients are paying for it, they really put it into the same box as like getting their hair colored or something. Like, they come in demanding a certain thing, and it's not always medically appropriate. And that sometimes is hard for new injectors, because you're just in this, it's like you're in retail, but you're also practicing medicine. I mean, it's just a weird zone to be in, especially for most of us who come out of a pretty hardcore clinical background, or those of us that have worked in a hospital where there's so many parameters you don't need to really think. As this is just, there's just a lot to consider. It's a great field. I mean, I love it. I'm happy I'm a part of it. And I would encourage anybody that's interested in it to go into it, because I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, totally. And one of the things that I find interesting too is this is one of those, I mean, this is one of those industries that I feel like is fueled by the perception of sort of aesthetics, right? Like, and what I mean by that is it's really fueled by people looking at how other people look, right? And not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but, like, for example, like, I wouldn't go on like something like Instagram, see someone sick and be like, all right, like, I'm gonna go and get that right now, right? But you're more inclined to be like, okay, well, if I do want to get a particular procedure done because of XYZ reason, I want to get that. And it's just like you said, it really is like retail, right? It's like kind of like this consumer driven thing that is actually, almost permeated by other people getting similar procedures. And then people are like, I want that. And it's like, well, you don't really have, maybe some of the ways that you can actually make this a success, whether that's you've gone over a number of reasons, whether that's maybe like facial structure or things like that, or some of the other elements that could really hurt somebody in the long run doing it. They don't care, right? They're really about that. And so I found that profound. And when you're dealing with folks, how is it that you've kind of explored maybe talking them through some of these options to educate them and really help them work through what they really should be getting and how they can, kind of either meet in the middle or find a better resolution of what they're doing, with those things in mind.
From the time that I started, and I think this is true for most nurses, we're all about educating the patient, whether it's about their diabetes or, about what filler they're choosing to put in their face. And I realized when I got into this industry, and this was before Instagram, 2012, right? So that there was just a real lack of educational material for patients. So I just sort of created my own, because if you can get the patient to understand what it is you're trying to do with their face, they're going to buy into your treatment plan more. And, it's not just my treatment plan. It's one that I talk to them about, and they need to be on board with it as well. But then you have a lot less problems with the patient on the other side. The more they understand coming in, and you can also say, really, when you think about informed consent and letting somebody lay hands on you, the more information the patient has, the better the informed consent, right? And so it sort of protects the injector as well. Because I think that in this industry, patients, when they come back and they're upset, it really all just comes down to communication, which is the hardest part of what we do, because I think different than how you think. I think, and I know this about myself, I think in pictures. It's the way I see and sort all information. And so if I think and see things like that and think that you think like that too, but you think in maybe all auditory, or, you just don't see what I see, which nobody does, right? We're all different. That's really where the breakdown starts. So creating visual tools for patients so that they could understand, what it was I was saying has been really, really helpful. And I will say this, I have the very first patient I ever injected, like almost 13 years ago, and she's still with me. And that really does speak volumes, because she would follow me anywhere just because I've taken the time. And that's one of the things when I train, I talk to providers about how important it is to talk to your patients. And listen, if they're pushing you for something that's not medically appropriate for them, I mean, I'm to the point where I just tell them, look, this is not a good treatment plan. I'm not comfortable doing it. And I feel like you would be better served at a different practice. And these are hard words to say, but you will save yourself a lot of grief on the other side if you do that. But I do think that I really enjoy my patients. And I think that when they understand what you're doing, it also relaxes them. They trust you more, and you get a relationship with them. It's not just like this wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, where new patients are landing. It's just like a hamster wheel. It's like you get to see these people look better. Like I have so many before and afters of patients who 5, 6, 7 years out, they're looking younger than they looked when they started with me. And that's really great. And it makes them feel great too.
One of the things that I really appreciate sort of about your approach is how you've had folks with long longevity who have stayed with you, right? And I think it leaves something to be said about how you actually work with the folks that you serve, and as clients, customers, and things like that. And I feel like not enough is said really about sort of that customer service / success item, right? Because of course, people could look at customer service as like, hey, or client services like, hey, let me just educate you a little bit. You get your procedure, you have a good one, right? But you're really looking out for, is this really actually going to get you the results long term that you want, and helping them, even though it's more of kind of like a retail sort of arrangement, really helping them, kind of be their best selves in the long run, right? So as somebody who's, in the in this field and trying to, sort of develop those good relationships and figure out how to service people in a way that helps them be the most successful, what are some of the things that you kind of consider philosophically in terms of building that out, and how you approach handling your clients so that you can actually deliver the right information in a way that helps them be the most successful as they're going through these procedures?
Well, I mean, I do think everything starts with education. I think that another thing that I always tell people this when I'm training, I don't treat anybody that I can't get photographs of, or, digital photographs of, because first of all, it goes on their chart. If they don't want to be on the internet, they don't have to be. But I think I heard that your brain accepts any changes to your face within like 3 to 5 days. Your brain just accepts it. When you look in the mirror, you think your face has always looked like this. And that really, I think that's a huge part of patient retention, is having those pictures to show people over the years, because they will not remember where they started. And so, but I think of my patients, and some are just passing through, but a lot of them I've developed relationships with. I get to hear about their kids and their grandkids, and it's really a blessing to be in this field, because it's not just about making somebody feel better about the way that they look, but you also get to see the ripple effect of, like, it seems so not important, but there is a ripple effect that happens with this. When people look better, they feel better, and they start living their life more fully. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but it's and we also do health and wellness at our clinic as well. And I think that's really important, because the largest demographic for this, even though there's a lot of younger women choosing to do different things, but I would say the largest demographic is, your 40 to 60-year-olds. And so I think that they're taking care of their bodies, they're eating well, but then their face just isn't matching how they feel on the inside. And so it seems like this wouldn't be such a big thing, but I'm always amazed. People just come back happier. And that's a great feeling for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to also just touch on how you discuss building a relationship with people, because I think that a lot of folks aren't aware of building, like building relationships with folks, even being in the tech world. I think a lot of people kind of undercut, building a relationship with their users, or building in a relationship with even some of the folks who are like channel partners and things like that, because they're more inclined to just try and do everything with technology and not really have that personal touch. And I think that your philosophy about providing those personalized sort of plans to helping somebody work through, getting to that point of feeling great, and like that they look great, they feel great, and it reverberates to everything else. I think that that's such a great thing to aspire to more, but more importantly, building that relationship, I think, is also that other element that I feel like helps folks, not only just like see the value in continuing to come back, but really, kind of just like stick around with you long term, because they feel like, you're someone who understands them. And that's all I feel like a part of that process, where when they could become an inpatient, all the way to, becoming a repeat visitor and getting more and more procedures.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into kind of why I left working for somebody else and decided to start working for myself, because a lot of these larger clinics, it is like you're seeing 30 patients a day. It's a rat race, and I just didn't like it, because I'm like, I don't even, these people are spending a lot of money, and what might not seem like a lot of money to one person, there's this other person that they've been saving for a year to get this. I mean, so you have all walks of life. And I just feel like on some level, if you're just like, all right, out of my chair, I got to go to the next one, it feels like dismissive and disrespectful. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to be an owner and create my own situation, and I'll speak for my partner in this too, Tina feels the same way, is that we just really enjoy people. So we wanted to not see more than 10 to 12 people a day max, and it gives you time to spend with them. And I will say that I have patients say all the time, no one's ever spent this much time, and they really appreciate it, and that builds loyalty too. But as a provider, you're about to touch them, and you're about to touch their face. And that's probably one of our most important, that's what the world sees, right? So it's really, an honor. And I feel grateful that the patient's chosen me, because there's 100 other providers within a mile, in many large cities. This industry is growing and continues to grow, and it's not going to stop. So I think this is the most important thing that a healthcare provider can do in this industry. Because if you can't connect with your patients, you won't keep them. If you can't keep them, you're not going to be successful. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then I also think that there's something to be said also about the word of mouth that comes from it as well, right? Like the actual people who will come in and say, you know what, like I had such a great experience with Wendy, and it builds you more business, right? It actually builds you that it actually helps you build that out and really help people, put it in their mind like, oh, like I really should check this out, right? And I really, maybe now is the time, right? And I feel like, whereas someone might not have looked at doing a procedure with urgency unless they had that little sort of nagging, hey, I keep seeing this online and like it seems like something I want to do. When you get that, sort of trusted person who says, hey, I had an amazing experience over here. It basically also brings in more business as well. And I feel like that's so important to, kind of what what a practice needs, whether that's, a clinic or, some kind of medical practice too.
Yeah, and I think that's true in my own business, but I think that's true when I train practices. Like over the years, I don't even know, I'm way over 1,000 providers that I've trained to inject, and I get called back to certain practices again and again, and people will be like, "Well, you already trained them. Like, what's going on?" The reason they're calling me back is because, and it's a compliment. I did a great job the first time, and I try to develop relationships with, other injectors, because I think that is really, really important, because you need to have some kind of a support system, especially when you start. I want to have a gazillion people I can call if I run into an issue, and I do, and I feel like I want to be in a very supportive community of injectors. And that's part of what I want to do also on this platform, is help injectors, because it just feels like there's a lot of this, like, me, I'm great, look at me, on Instagram. And it's like, the thing about a lot of the social media venues, they're great, but you can say anything you want. Maybe it's true, maybe it's completely fabricated. I mean, and so, but patients don't know that. And I just read in a report that 95% of plastic surgery patients look on social media, at least 2 different venues. So I think that's interesting. But that being said, I think, we're still living in the real world. We're not in a virtual world. So you're laying hands on these people. If you have a problem, you need to have other injectors that you can troubleshoot with, and that'll help you. Worst case scenario, if you're having an emergency, but sometimes it's just a matter of the patient comes back, they're unhappy, just being able to reach out to your peers and say, have you seen this before? How did you handle it? What should I do? And, that's really, really helpful, as opposed to, being an island, because that's not helpful. And I really, over the years, I've been helped by various providers, and if I train somebody, I help them. And I mean, I had somebody that I trained 7 years ago that just called me, and I was happy to help them, because stuff comes up all the time, and, sometimes it's unexpected. So you need extra support.
Yeah, and going back to all of these training engagements that you've had, right? When you were first maybe getting started in doing these trainings, you were probably, I assume that you were probably working for like maybe a larger organization. So was that kind of how you got your break into working with some of those organizations asking you to do the training, or was it something that you were actively going out and looking for opportunities to share more information?
No, I mean, honestly, I think it's just the stars were aligned. I was in the right place at the right time in front of the right person. I mean, that's how a lot of stuff in life happens, right? Because again, we didn't have social media when I started, and I had come from a pretty high level position, in terms of my clinical skills. So the facial injections, initially, it was just going to be kind of a holding point until I got my real job, as a nurse practitioner. I have, I have 4 kids, and at the time, my second child, she's autistic and she was self-injuring. So I could only work 3 days a week. I mean, that was all I could do, because my parents had me covered for the other 2 days. And if I had taken a full-time job like I had wanted to, I would have been fired, because I couldn't do what they wanted me to do. So one of my instructors is like, oh, you should come, work for this doctor, learn and learn. And I hadn't even ever had anything at that point myself. So I didn't really know anything about it, but it sounded fun. And I got into it and really, really liked it. And I hadn't even been injecting for a year when I got asked to be a trainer by a pharmaceutical company. And so I didn't expect it to last. I mean, I really didn't. But back then, I mean, there really was nothing. So I created my own stuff to take to my first training, because I'm pretty anxious and type A, and I like to be as prepared as I can. And it just, I was received in a way I still don't understand, but it ended up being a great thing. I don't know that that would happen for me today because the world has changed, but the practice of injectables has not. And I think one of the things that makes me a little bit different, my undergraduate degree is in architectural design and I can draw. And so I think that because, and I was in one of those mega clinics where I was doing 150 syringes a week of dermal filler. And I didn't really need a lot of guidance, just, because I was coming in as a nurse practitioner and I could prescribe and, do everything I needed to do. So I didn't see 10 people inject the same way. So a lot of this stuff, just intuitively, I inject all the way around the head. There's some things that I do very differently that when I train, people are like, I've never seen anybody do that before. But again, it makes sense to me. And it goes back to how I think about things. It's all in images and pictures. So, I was given a chance, and the CEO of this company was like, I've seen your before and afters. I really want you to train for our company. And he opened a door for me and I walked through it and it turned out great. But, again, I think a lot of this stuff is just being in the right place at the right time. But I think that if it's something that an injector wants to do, the way that I would probably try to do it today is I would try to get into a mega clinic, because that is where big pharma chooses their trainers from, because they buy so much. And this isn't, I've dialogued with CEOs of pharmaceutical, because I don't think that's right, because I do think you can have somebody that's in more of a boutique setting. I mean, there are amazing injectors in these settings and they get overlooked because the pharmaceutical companies, they want to please the people that are buying the most product. And I would say that's another thing that consumers really don't understand. And you wouldn't be unless you were in the field, so if that was my end goal, was to be a physician trainer, I would get myself into probably a core physician office that was like a mega office. But again, those opportunities are few and far. So being as prepared when you have the interview and coming in the door, I'm always impressed when I interview somebody and they have a ton of knowledge and haven't injected. I mean, that goes really far, because now you've shown me that you really want to do this and I'm more inclined to hire you.
That's actually a really interesting, line of thought too, as well. Like you've been on both sides now, right? You have your own practice now, and you've been in that seat of somebody who might have been coming out of school, or like, somebody who is really just, maybe looking to get hired and, maybe a new spot. So, you just kind of touched upon it about the ways that people could show that they're actually prepared and show that they actually have really a vested interest in improving themselves or being a part of the field. So when you're interviewing people, and maybe when you went through the interview process, how do you feel like someone could position themselves best for, success? Like, how could they prepare themselves for, some of those roles that they feel like could be most in a way that could be most effective towards actually getting the jobs that they want to get? Are there, tidbits of advice other than, of course, what you've mentioned so far, or, are there other ways to prepare that you think are going to be great?
I think having, again, information's not hard to find online. Finding out what the practice uses, what products they use. I mean, I don't really know a practice that doesn't have a website that lists, we list all that. And then asking, thoughtful questions and just trying to be transparent about what you want coming in the door. I really appreciate that, because if what you want to do is, because I can probably help get you there. That's the thing. But I would have to know that you wanted that, So sometimes people are so anxious to get into this industry and they're afraid to be transparent. And sometimes I find that makes them act so weird in the interview that I'm not inclined to hire them. But I like, if somebody comes in and they already know that we do biostimulators in our practice, and this is our philosophy on lips, and then what devices we have, and then and can ask me thoughtful questions about those things, I'm always very impressed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a lot of doing your homework beforehand, right? It's like in any process, before you go into any meeting where you're trying to sort of pitch the idea of yourself, like you should definitely have some wherewithal to like prepare, in any setting, right? And making sure that you know exactly who you're talking to, what it is that they do, because I think there's a certain level of preparedness that you should have that indicates to you that you're a professional, right? And it actually shows, manifests itself through how you explore, your own skills with reference to how you can benefit that practice. So now this is on, personally curious level, right? So I have to know, for, let's just say for folks who, are maybe trying to get some of these treatments and they're unsure, but they want to maybe get some more information and knowledge. What are maybe some of the first steps in determining if they should maybe go through, a biostimulators treatment, or, something that has to do with like injections, and sort of what are some of the things that someone should, maybe research or prepare themselves, and what would actually indicate to that, what indicators to them should they find in order for them to feel like they were ready for this process?
Well, I think that if you haven't ever done anything, the first thing you should do is go in and get a consult. I mean, we give every new patient a free consult. And so that will allow you to figure out if you have any medical issues, which would be contraindicated for these things. And I also try to gauge, does the patient really want to do this, or are they going to be better suited for a medical peel or a facial, or, if somebody's never had filler, I'm not going to put a long acting filler in them. I mean, and what I always say to the patient is, what if you hate it? What if, I mean, because, there are fillers that we can reverse, and there are fillers that are much harder to reverse. So let's start with something that you can try it. And if you like it, then we can go forward. The other thing that dictates whether or not I'll put a biostimulator in somebody is their age. If you're 50 plus, you're going to be fighting aging from now on, and so it's not going to get easier. I mean, your facial structure, your bone loss, all that stuff gets worse, and it's not anything to be depressed about, but you're at that point, you need something that's got a little bit more oomph, and that's a biostimulator, because you're not going to need less of this stuff as time goes on. Does that make sense? But I mean, I try to gauge patients, because I live in a pretty interesting area of the country where there's a lot of people here that don't want to do anything that's not natural, but then they're in my clinic. So I'm always kind of confused about that too. But I'm like, well, botulism occurs naturally in nature, but there's also a lot of things that can kill you that are natural. So I'm not sure, so if I get the feeling like, if people are asking me certain questions like that, it's probably not going to be a good choice for them. And I try to push them towards something else. But I don't think patients that have never done anything should try to come in the door and demand treatment, because you should always get a consult first. And if you get a weird feeling, or you just, don't click with them, you should go someplace else and get a consult, because it is kind of like dating. I mean, you need to like the person laying hands on you, I think.
So yeah,
So,
no, totally. So now that does make me curious though. Has there ever been an instance where somebody actually just came in, maybe they saw a few videos online and said, I want to get this without like consult?
oh, I could have my own reality show of things that have happened. Like, yes, and demanded that I did, do these things. And what I said to this woman, and she's probably out there cursing me, is, you get to pick me, but I get to pick you too, and I do not choose you. I'm going to recommend a different provider and practice down the road that I think you'll be better fitted for, because I don't think this is it. Because what she wanted me to do was not going to be a good treatment plan, because I have a pretty natural aesthetic. I don't want you to look jacked up. I don't want people to look at you and go, wow, you've had work done. And there are areas of the country where and women in certain areas where it's like a status symbol. It's like driving a Mercedes Benz, or you go to different regions. It's interesting, but that's just personally not my aesthetic. And so I don't want to do that to somebody and then get 100 more patients that want to look like that, because I don't like that look. There's nothing wrong with it, let me say that, but it's just not. I want to instead give the most beautiful version of you. I'm not trying to make you look different. I'm trying to make patients look well rested.
No, totally. And I'm sure there's probably a ton of stories that you could share one day. And, what I've noticed is, as it pertains to folks who have, those kind of reactions, like, I feel like those are like the best people to make for reality TV shows, like the stuff you see on TLC with like My 600-Pound Life. And it's like, okay, like, clearly there's some challenges here that are definitely television worthy, and I'm sure you've dealt with quite a few of them.
And, I think the other thing is the providers being able to try to sort out who has body dysmorphia disorder. And I really do believe it's a lot more pervasive in today's culture than it's ever been. When I have a young woman, and this person I chose not to treat, she had no less than 2,000 selfies of herself. I mean, I don't even know. I'm like, do you work? I mean, because I don't understand how you could have this many pictures of yourself. And what I try to explain to patients, because we saw this a lot after the COVID shutdown, you couldn't get that same picture, same lighting, same angle. It's like a blood pressure. It's a snapshot in time. You couldn't do that again if your life depended on it, and so you're wanting to make a change to your face based on one picture, and it's not real. So there is some of that goes along with it too. I mean, some days I don't know if I'm in psych or I'm in aesthetics. It's just confusing for me too. So
Yeah, in a sense, you might actually be in both just by the nature of your field. So I think that we've covered so many, really vast different types of topics on the, actual subject of what you do, how folks who are, nurses can, move through the field, and even just kind of generally sort of like what you've experienced at the clinic, which is probably like an entire, kind of tale in and of itself. But, I did want to give you the opportunity, of course, here, since we're running the time, an opportunity to share anything that you wanted to maybe discuss with the folks at home, or anything that you feel like would be maybe useful for other people to know about, in terms of like promotions and things like that. So just wanted to give you the floor and any opportunity for you to share anything you like.
yeah, I think, so what I'm going to loop back to, we're using your platform to create these learning modules for nurses. We're also hoping to put some of our patient videos and create a section just for patients. So that's a different arm. And then back to like just the story that I told, having injectors that can reach out to each other, because sometimes it's not all clinical. Sometimes it's this kind of stuff. How do I say this to a patient? Because they're not hearing what I'm saying, or how do I, and just hearing from people that have been through it that can just help you navigate, because some of this stuff, and it's a lot of it is more the psych stuff that you're dealing with, the pathology of patients, and I've given it a lot of thought. When you do something to yourself that makes you look better and feel better, you're making a hardwire connection in your brain. If I do this, then I get this. And that's, as providers, I think we have to be really careful, because that can get out of control, right, for people. And so you do need to be willing to shut down certain patients, because there is a desire to keep doing it to get that feeling. And that isn't true for everybody, but there are certain patients that, that feel that way. And I just think having a community of injectors that, are available, if you're logged on, they can see you're logged on, and you can chat live. You can send videos or questions and they can get back to you. I think that would be really, really helpful. So I'm hoping to create something like that.
Absolutely. And we're happy to assist, of course, and we appreciate obviously being able to try and build up that community, because I feel like it can really do a lot of good for the folks who are practitioners, nurses, patients and the like. So but in any case, it's been a fantastic conversation. I just want to thank you again, Wendy, for the time, sharing everything about the Skinovation practice and really, sort of providing an opportunity for us to get to know all of the different elements of like what goes into, all of the work that you do. So I just want to say once again, thank you for the time. And for those of you at home, we really appreciate you as always. And we look forward to seeing you in our next edition of the FreeFuse sessions. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Mike. See ya.